Of all the movies you've done, what's your personal favorite?
Bloodsport and Hard Target.
Oh, yeah.
Hey guys, today's video is all about Hard Target. So hopefully you're a fan of Jean-Claude Van Damme, this movie, or even John Woo. If not, watch the video anyway. You'll probably want to end up seeing this movie after I talk about it. Oh, make sure to stay till the end because I'm going to be talking about the sequel, Hard Target 2. I'll give you my thoughts on it. This is really part one of a new 4-part series I'm doing. It's about all the Hong Kong New Wave directors that Jean-Claude Van Damme worked with. In fact, these were the first US films that they directed, and they were all with Jean-Claude Van Damme. There's a really great article from The Dissolve, and I'll link it in the description below. It's titled, How Jean-Claude Van Damme Became Hong Kong's Gateway to Hollywood. It mentions that between 1993 and 1998, Hong Kong New Wave tapped Van Damme to become their poster boy for their introduction into Western cinema. Jean-Claude Van Damme and Hong Kong go way back, by the way. He's actually resided there for several years and claims that it could very well be the best city to live in. Of course, JCVD would first come to prominence with the film Bloodsport, which was filmed in Hong Kong, and you could just tell he had a blast shooting there, and here's what he has to say about that.
Why do you have this draw to Hong Kong?
When I was in Los Angeles and a guy was trying to make it, it was a hard life for me, 5-6 years of it. My luck was that Bloodsport happened in Hong Kong, but normally it was made for Los Angeles. Finally, the movie was made in Hong Kong, so to come from this type of life to something like Hong Kong, this is my place. It's my first movie, it's my first city, open 24/7 in '85.
He would of course also star in Double Impact as well, which was filmed in Hong Kong a few years after Bloodsport. Going back to the Hong Kong filmmakers, Hong Kong New Wave, by the way, started in 1979. During the 1980s, the film industry really started to flourish in China. Many Chinese households did not have a TV at the time, and film served as a primary source of entertainment. Many of the New Wave directors had a Western-style education and thus were influenced by Western filmmaking and culture. The films of the New Wave stylistically lacked any sort of coherence between each other, but rather the term was used to make the distinction between new filmmakers and studio filmmaking. These films utilized new technology like synchronous sound, new editing techniques, and filming movies on location. This so-called new editing techniques part is key, as that would play a big part in the film I'm going to talk about today, which is Hard Target. And going back to the Western influence that Hong Kong New Wave encompasses, Hard Target's director, John Woo, loved New Orleans setting in Hard Target, as he wanted to make a movie look like a Western. Interesting tidbit, by the way, the film's writer had the story take place in New Orleans to give an explanation for Jean-Claude Van Damme's accent.
Next time, be more careful when you show your wallet.
Prior to directing any American films, John Woo gained a lot of popularity with the movies he made starring Chow Yun-fat. Many of you may have seen these, A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, and Hardboiled, for example. Speaking of Chow Yun-fat, Hollywood would come knocking on his door in the late 90s, and he'd have a handful of US produced movies such as The Replacement Killers and The Corruptor. I'll do an entire different video on him in the future. Now, Hard Target was the first big Hollywood studio movie helmed by an Asian director.
He's the #1 action director in Hong Kong. It's like the Steven Spielberg of action. And I brought the guy, the studio and I brought the guy in the USA, and I'm very proud to be the first one to introduce the technique of John Woo in America. He's incredible. What he's doing with the action.
John Woo was first offered the job to direct by Universal Pictures chairman Tom Pollock after he'd seen John Woo's The Killer. 1989's The Killer made a run through Toronto, Park City, and Cannes film festivals, racking up critical accolades for its hyperkinetic action sequences and splendid excessive gunplay. You could say it made quite the killing. Prior to deciding to take on Hard Target, John Woo went through several scripts. He stated that some of them were good, some of them were very good, but the rest were simply martial arts movies, and he told producers that he had no interest in doing those kind of films anymore since he had already done so many of them already. One of these scripts was called Ballistic, by the way, which was written by Stephen D'Souza and David J. Chow. It was supposed to be a Warner Bros. Film produced by Oliver Stone and of course directed by the aforementioned John Woo. It's really a shame that it never got produced though, as it was set to star martial arts sensation Philip Ree, who was looking to build off the momentum he gained from doing Best of the Best. Make sure to check out my video on Philip Ree, by the way, which I'll link in the description below. Another one of the scripts John Woo was offered at the time was Face Off. However, he initially turned it down because he was turned off by the science fiction aspect of the story. He would of course later have a change of heart and the film would become his third US project, but only after the futuristic setting was changed to a contemporary one. Now, after Hollywood's interest in John Woo from 1989's The Killer, he would still direct 2 more Hong Kong films before finally coming stateside, 1990's Bullet in the Head and then 1992's cult classic Hardboiled, which would see a sequel of sorts in the 2007 video game Stranglehold. It's a lot of fun if you guys haven't played it, definitely worth checking out. Upon completion of Hardboiled, John Woo would finally make his US directorial debut with 1993's Hard Target. Jean-Claude Van Damme had already been a huge fan of John Woo and actually met with him, together with writer Chuck Farrer and producer James Jacks, back in 1991 while Van Damme was shooting Double Impact. Although John Woo liked the story for Hard Target, he thought the film would be too difficult to make, but John Woo and Van Damme got along well despite both men's difficulty with their command of the English language. Despite early misgivings of working with Van Damme on Hard Target, Woo changed many of the action scenes in the film to make them more spectacular after finding Van Damme was more than up for it. It should be worth noting, one of the reasons why Hard Target is so action-packed is because Van Damme's involvement. Kurt Russell was actually originally sought for the role of Chance Boudreaux, but his schedule was booked for 2 years and Universal didn't want to wait that long. Also, Universal Pictures decided that they wanted to be in the Van Damme business. The studio had previously released his martial arts epic Lionheart in 1991, and all his movies that released after that and before Hard Target had all been strong performers at the domestic as well as international box office. How do you guys think Hard Target would have been with Kurt Russell instead of Van Damme in the lead role, by the way? Let me know in the comments below. Now, story-wise, Hard Target was just a fun movie. It really had a great tagline, "Don't hunt what you can't kill." Writer Chuck Farrer originally based the script on 1965's The Naked Prey. That film's plot takes place in South Africa and centers around a safari guide trying to survive in the harsh environment, all the while trying to avoid death at the hands of vengeful African natives. The story is loosely based on the experiences of American explorer John Colter. This initial idea and script for Hard Target really didn't gain much traction. However, Chuck Farrer would make one final attempt on the script, this time basing it off of 1932's The Most Dangerous Game. The story in that one would feature a big game hunter from New York City who falls off of a yacht and swims what seems to be an abandoned and isolated island in the Caribbean, where he is hunted by a Russian aristocrat. So much for taking refuge on an abandoned island. Hard Target, of course, would see a woman, Yancy Butler, hire a drifter, Van Damme, as a guide through New Orleans in search of her father who has gone missing. The film's writer, Chuck Farrer, actually plays Douglas Bender, the man who goes missing at the beginning of the film. He's really the one that sets off the chain of events that would have Yancy Butler's character go in search of him. The introduction of Van Damme's character is probably one of the coolest you'll ever see. I mean, the man's so cool he can even pull off a mullet. He helps her find out that her father was killed by an organization that sells the opportunity to hunt human prey. This organization is currently taking advantage of a police strike in New Orleans and even has a coroner in their back pocket. It's a really well thought out illicit operation. Chuck Farrer actually had some pretty good writing credits to his name outside of Hard Target. Prior to that film, for example, he had 1990's Navy SEALs with Charlie Tigerblood Sheen and Michael Biehn of Terminator 1 fame, Darkman in 1990 starring Liam Neeson, and after Hard Target he had Barbed Wire 96 with Pamela Anderson and The Jackal in 1997 with Bruce Willis. So, any great action movie needs a formidable opponent, and in Hard Target's case we got not one but two great memorable villains. Lance Henriksen plays Emile Fouchon, a wealthy sportsman who hunts homeless ex-soldiers for sport. Lance Henriksen accepted the role of Emile Fouchon, stating that he was a great fan of John Woo, noting that his earlier films were, quote, so creative, so balletic, and had this incredible philosophy in them. The violence was only a container for the philosophy. Now, John Woo let Lance Henriksen decide how big or small to play the role. Arnold Vosloo plays Pig Van Cleef, a collaborator and the right-hand man to Lance Henriksen's character. He said working with John Woo was an actor's dream come true. Arnold Vosloo's character name, Van Cleef, by the way, is a reference to actor Lee Van Cleef, who played a sadistic antagonist in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Lance Henriksen and Arnold Vosloo had such great on-screen chemistry that one of the Universal Pictures executives stated that he wished he could have gotten the pair of their own film together. I would have loved to see that myself.
It appears we'll have one last hunt after all, Pick.
John Woo's original cut of Hard Target ran nearly 2 hours and focused more on the Emile Fouchon character. Jean-Claude Van Damme was not too happy about this and stated that moviegoers were paying to see a Van Damme movie, not a Lance Henriksen movie. So along with his editor, Van Damme locked himself in an editing room for 2 days and re-edited the film for the producers at Universal. This, of course, will not be the first time Van Damme recut a film. In fact, you could credit the real start of his career with taking this sort of action. It all goes back to Bloodsport. Long story short, the original cut was apparently a train wreck and Van Damme was devastated by it. Lucky for us, and for him, his recut version ended up becoming a cult classic that we all know today. Make sure to watch my top 10 amazing facts about Jean-Claude Van Damme video to get more insight into that whole thing. It's fact number 8 in that video, by the way. Going back to the editing of Hard Target, it wasn't just for the sole purpose of making this more of a Van Damme film. The original cut earned a NC-17 rating for violence and was actually resubmitted to the MPAA 7 times before it finally earned an R rating. A lot of the villains got shot up a lot more than what we see in theaters. There was also a disturbing scene of extremely graphic stock safari footage of animals being hunted and killed that was intercut with Fouchon playing the piano. Even after all those cuts were made, many critics called the movie the most violent film of the summer. One critic said it was only concerned with one thing: violence. Noted film critic Kevin Thomas enjoyed the picture and said the film's violence was no more explicit than the previous fall's Under Siege. Kevin Thomas, by the way, has long been a cheerleader of Van Damme and Seagal. The overall body count in Hard Target is 34, which includes this snake, by the way. Let me know in the comment section if you know of a Van Damme movie with a higher body count. During the production for Hard Target, John Woo was pressured by Universal to tone down the type of violence and body count that they had seen in his Hong Kong films. The overall production for Hard Target lasted 74 days, but was put on a tight schedule by Universal that only allowed 65 days of shooting time. Tight schedule aside, one of the difficulties for John Woo was dealing with the star power of Jean-Claude Van Damme, who exerted a great deal of control over the entire project, from script approval to filming all the way down to the final cut. For example, Van Damme would insist on having one of the cameras focus on his muscles at all times. This is probably why John Woo stated that Van Damme had, quote, a pretty big ego, but he's still professional and always tried to do a good job. Van Damme would also delay filming because he was often found on his phone trying to negotiate new projects. Van Damme was clearly ambitious and trying to strike while the iron was hot. Despite these difficulties, John Woo did not regret working with Van Damme and referred to him as a, quote, quite interesting guy. In Hong Kong, Woo says that the director is everything, and that's what he was accustomed to. Producer James Jacks recalls that although John Woo was not the most powerful person on the set, he was certainly the most respected. It should be noted that Universal was afraid that the limited amount of English John Woo spoke could potentially be a big problem on set. They actually hired Sam Raimi to oversee the entire shoot and would use him to replace John Woo if need be. Instead, Raimi would become Woo's staunchest supporter and even ended up getting into a shouting match with Universal executives.
We're like face to face, like a manager and an umpire, you know, we're like, hey, we're not talking about it! I don't say what you're saying!
Of course, since John Woo was not completely fluent in English, it took time for the cast and crew to get used to working with him. For example, it was tough for Woo to communicate the type of shot he wanted with cinematographer Russell Carpenter. To further complicate matters, Carpenter found further difficulty in filming just from a technical perspective, particularly when it came to the large gunfight scenes. He specifically mentioned the Mardi Gras parade warehouse scene in an interview, recollecting, "Just the lighting for a space like that, with all those strange shapes and shadows, was difficult enough." But John would then add further complication of wanting the scene shot from several angles at once, often with more than one camera moving. I think anyone who's seen this movie would say it was worth it. Extremely well done, highly entertaining action sequences. You're not just going to get that type of effort in any DTV fare, or even that technical mastery in a lot of theatrical release films. Lance Henriksen recalled that it was a gradual process that led the cast and crew to start seeing the film as a John Woo film rather than a Jean-Claude Van Damme film. However, despite that, Van Damme would still get what he wanted. For example, the film was originally to end with a boat chase, which was changed to a horseback chase at the insistence of the muscles from Brussels. John Woo would eventually get the film as Hollywood boat chase though, but it'd be several years later in Face Off. Now that I think about it, maybe that's why he had a change of heart and decided to direct that movie, despite his earlier lack of interest. You know, nowadays people do it for the gram, but I think John Woo did it for the boat chase. As far as action goes, I always thought Hard Target was a perfect blend of martial arts and gunplay, as witnessed in this classic scene here. And you see a lot of the director's trademarks within these action scenes. I call them Wooisms. For example, John Woo often used doves in key action sequences, which symbolizes purity and the hero's journey in the final sequence. However, since Hard Target takes place in New Orleans, Woo decided to utilize pigeons in their place to make more sense of that setting. Another classic Wooism you'll find is that back-to-back banter between the hero and the villain, which was brilliantly played between Van Damme and Arnold Vosloo in this scene here.
Woodrow. I've been looking all over for you.
You've been looking in the wrong places.
It's good, because I know you wouldn't want to hurt my feelings.
Also, another one of Woo's trademarks would be someone throwing another character a gun, and of course the use of dual-wielding pistols. Utilizing slow motion is another element John Woo likes to use, which works perfectly with Van Damme, as he is the king of slow-mo when it comes to his action scenes. Here's something funny. Speaking of slow motion, during the final battle, Lance Henriksen's coat accidentally caught fire. He never broke character though and continued acting the scene while pulling his coat off. This remained in the final cut of the film you see right here. During the initial test screening of the film, John Woo mentioned to the producer that they never did such previews in Hong Kong. Of course, the producer would ask him how he'd know if audiences liked the movie or not. John Woo responded, "Oh, if they didn't like it, they'd just set the theater on fire and slash seats." The initial preview for Hard Target did not go very well, by the way. John Woo utilized a lot of dissolves for scene transitions, which he found confused American audiences, who typically associate those with flashbacks. The American audience was also not a fan of all the slow motion shots used and felt the violence was too extreme, causing a lot of them to walk out. That original cut was nearly 2 hours long, by the way. Of course, the final theatrical release cut would fix several of these issues and ended up delighting audiences with a runtime of 1 hour and 37 minutes. Now, this video would not be complete unless I at least mentioned 2016's Hard Target 2. It stars martial arts sensation Scott Adkins, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Quite frankly, that movie sucked. It continues the human hunt theme, this time in the jungles of Myanmar and Thailand. Of course, that setting would be a lot cheaper to shoot in and portray in film than the original's New Orleans. And of course, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting or visually exciting either. As far as the film's villain goes, he's played by Robert Knepper, and I liked Robert in a lot of the Prison Break series, but in this film he really just can't compare to the likes of Lance Henriksen and Arnold Vosloo in the Hard Target film. He just lacks the intensity and cold, psychotic, depraved presence someone like Lance Henriksen can portray in a movie like this.
You know why you're here? You paid us $500,000 to find out if you're alive or dead. Now finish him. Finish! God, why didn't he go fishing?
Yes, we're talking about an action movie, and critics usually don't appreciate the actual acting in these types of films, but Lance Henriksen actually received a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of Emile Fouchon in Hard Target. It's things like this, in addition to having Van Damme at his peak and John Woo's visual style, that really help catch lightning in a bottle. And it's why we get a sequel, purely using the name Hard Target as a cash grab in my opinion, 23 years later. The trailer for Hard Target 2 actually looks pretty decent, but it's pretty much the equivalent of putting a flappy body in a pair of Spanx. The advertising might fool you, but the package is not really what it's portrayed to be. The overall movie is just poorly executed. You don't care about the characters, which some of you may think is not that important in an action movie, but I'd 100% disagree. There's a reason why an action movie like Die Hard is so beloved, for example. Even take Van Damme's Lionheart, how could you not root for Leon? It seems like the only purpose of Hard Target 2, outside of trying to bank off the original's name, is to set up the various fight scenes, which makes the movie just feel like a video game. A complaint I have with Van Damme's own 1999's Universal Soldier's Return, by the way. As far as Scott Adkins goes, he's done much better work than this, but this, Hard Target 2, is not his fault.
You see this? This is not your fault. I know.
He's not the director, he's not the producer. I'm sure he was extremely excited to sign on and star in this film. Who wouldn't be? Overall, Scott Adkins has done some good work in the DTV realm, straight to video, and I'd put him right up there with Michael J. White. As far as the top two guys in the martial arts genre doing straight to video work right now, I'd say they've pretty much been the top two guys well over the last decade, in fact. As far as martial arts skills go, yeah, Scott Adkins is incredible. He could pretty much pull off whatever fight choreographer would want him to do. The first time I seen his Guyver kick in Undisputed 2, for example, I was beyond impressed. Now, as far as on-screen presence goes, he's just no match for Van Damme in my opinion. I mean, look at all the guys that came out during Van Damme's era that were consigned to straight-to-video fare, or even guys that had a small theatrical run. I've covered a lot of these guys in my video here. The top martial arts movie stars of the 1990s that weren't Jean-Claude Van Damme or Steven Seagal. I'll link that description below. In that video, I break down why a lot of them didn't end up gaining the overall popularity that someone like Van Damme had gotten. But one thing I didn't mention in that video is the so-called it factor. It's really that star quality and that on-screen presence that certain actors have and others just don't. Van Damme certainly has it, and you can clearly see it even when he played the villain in Black Eagle back in 1987, for example. Now, because Hard Target was so good, a lot of you may be wondering why we never seen Van Damme and John Woo team up again. I certainly would have loved to see it happen, and it actually almost did. After the domestic and international box office success of the film, Universal Pictures, Van Damme, and John Woo briefly considered reteaming for another action film to be titled Shadow of Death. This project would sadly never materialize, partly due to the difficult relationship between Van Damme and John Woo. Anyway, let me know in the comments section what you think about Hard Target.
Hunting season is over.